the members. Thank you. Hearing from order members and their different expressions around going for refuge. And yeah, I was just sort of thinking about this earlier, and you know, there is no order in a way. There are only order members, and every order member has a different expression, you know, around their going for refuge. And as we heard from Paraga last week, you know, commitment is primary and lifestyle is secondary. And again, you know, some of our expression of going for refuge is sometimes in the context of our lifestyle as well. So again, we're going to have two talks tonight. The first one is going to be by Sajjamega, and the second one's going to be by Kshantika. And again, there'll be very different experiences and stories around their experience of going for refuge. And I really enjoy hearing these different talks. They are really quite inspiring. And it just sort of makes me realise how different, you know, we all are. And I get a lot of confidence from that. So I'll just say a little bit about Sajjamega. Sajjamega and we were kind of ordained at a similar sort of time, and it was very nice sharing a going away ritual with her at the centre, and that was about 4 years ago, maybe, I think about 4 years ago. And yeah, and I really enjoyed that. But when I was thinking about Sajjamega earlier today, I was just sort of thinking about there's this sort of stillness about her that I sort of feel when I'm in her presence. And I was very much thinking about T.S. Eliot, and he talks about a still part of the turning wheel. And I thought, oh, that really just, for me and my experience of Sajjamega, captures her really well. And then I read the poem, and then I read a little bit further, and it said, "At the still point, there is a dance." And I thought, oh, I quite like that. But there, again, there is this real calmness around her, and something collected around her that I really enjoy. And that makes her very attractive and very approachable. So let's hear from Sajjamega. And again, there is no rush. We do have up to half an hour each if you want to talk that long. And so if you get carried away with enthusiasm and inspiration, then just go with that. Anyway, thank you, Sajjamega.
Oh, thank you so much, Fiona. What a beautiful introduction. I feel, yeah, very moved. Thank you. Wow. Well, I'm sitting here looking out at real people in the shrine room, and it's the first time I've done that for over a year. So I do feel moved. So, oh yeah, how wonderful to be here. We haven't heard any cheers yet, so I'm not sure what's going on in the outside world, but I'm really grateful those of you who are here tonight and those of you online. I am going to look at everyone here, so I'm not avoiding you online, but it's just a joy to actually be able to interact with real people instead of just talking to a screen. So that's what I'm going to do. So apologies for those of you online. Yesterday, it struck me that I wanted to dedicate this talk to people, and I've never done that before. I've heard other people do that, and I've always really found it a lovely thing, but I never have. But yeah, so I had a very strong feeling yesterday that I wanted to dedicate this short talk to 3 particular people, without whom I wouldn't really be able to give this talk. Now, the interesting thing is that none of them are Buddhists. They are all Christians. And in fact, they're all ordained Christians in their own different traditions. But they have had a huge, huge impact on my life over the past 5-6 years. And yeah, so I wanted to dedicate this talk to Chris, to Paul, and to Andrew. And I'll explain more about them later. So, go back to, I think it's 2007, so about 14 years ago. And in many ways, my life looked like it was going incredibly well. I had pretty much most of the things that the world says you need to have a good life. So I lived in a very nice house in Lady Bay. I had a partner who loved me. I had my own business, which was going very well. I was earning lots of money. I had exciting holidays abroad. I had good friends. Yeah, I had all the things, all the trappings, if you like, of life that were supposed to mean that all was well. And yet I was deeply, deeply unhappy. I had what I now know was just that very strong sense of dukkha in my life. And the sort of existential dukkha, that sense of what is this all about? What is the point? I have all these things and I'm still not satisfied, I'm still unhappy. And as I sort of look back on my life, I'd seen that I'd always had this search for meaning and purpose. I wanted a life that meant something. And yet I hadn't seemed to find that meaning. So those of you who know me will know some of my story. I don't want to go into lots of my earlier life, but I did seek out, I had that spiritual yearning from a young age, which actually sort of manifested through becoming very involved in the church, because that was the only context I had at the time. But even that, it just wasn't what I was looking for. And the church and I parted ways somewhat acrimoniously, but that's another story. So I'd been searching all this time, and I'd reached this point where I was just very, very unhappy. And I thought that meditation might help. So I Googled Meditation Nottingham, and up came the Buddhist Centre. And so I walked through the doors, and from that moment on, my life changed, I can say, completely changed. So as I came to the centre, it's interesting, I came to learn to meditate, but it was actually when I heard the Dharma that's what struck, what caught me. Not the meditation, but actually hearing the Dharma, hearing the teaching of the Buddha. And that's what just, took my heart really. And so I became more involved in the centre. And for me, it was a path, the path of ethics really was what took me. And I wanted to try to make my life sort of fit and become more and more ethically sensitive. That's what I was trying to do. So in lots of different ways, things happened, things changed. I left my partner, I moved to Sherwood, yay. Lots of different things happened. I ended up being with Vanessa, those of you know. And so in lots of different parts of my life, things felt like they were falling into place. I was able to practice. And yeah, there was this big thing in my life that just did not seem to fit, and that was my work. I just felt more and more that the work I was doing was just pretty meaningless. It didn't feel like it added very much to society, to the world. It paid me a lot of money for doing something that I didn't really feel justified in. So I became more and more uncomfortable with it, more and more dissatisfied with the work I was doing. And so I decided to leave the business and to let my business partner carry on with it. So that's what I did. And I had a couple of years of just trying different things, trying different types of work. And again, they were much more, it felt like they should have been the thing. I did mediation, I did advocacy, I did different things, but again, none of them really felt like it's what I wanted to do. And I was becoming a bit despondent really, because in so many ways I felt like my spiritual path was really blossoming. I was training for ordination. I could see things were changing in my life, and yet work just wasn't, just was that rub. So Vanessa and I decided to throw everything up in the air and go traveling for 6 months. Let's just see what happens. And it was during that time that I had this inkling of what I might want to do. For some reason, when I was reflecting on, what do you want to do, Satchiamega? Well, I wasn't Satchiamega then. What is it? What kind of work do you want to do? What came to mind was actually, well, maybe could I become a chaplain in a hospital? So I just kept mulling that over, and I thought, I don't think Buddhists can do that, can they? Anyway, we came back and I started to explore, and that's when I've met the first of the people that I've dedicated this talk to. I met Chris, who welcomed me really beautifully at the hospitals here in Nottingham and encouraged me to start to explore whether I could become a chaplain. So so that really blossomed for me, and again, lots of detail, but I won't go into all the detail. But basically, I ended up working for 3 years as a chaplain in a hospice, which was an amazing experience, and that's where Paul comes into it. He was the man who really took a punt and thought, yeah, we might be in Chesterfield, which is perhaps not known to be a hotbed of Buddhism. But we'll give it a try, and we'll have you as one of our chaplains. And then nearly, just over 18 months ago, I actually moved back to Nottingham and started working for the hospitals here. And that was Andrew, who again, just encouraged me so much to become a chaplain and part of the team. So things just sort of fell into place. Once I started working as a chaplain, it felt a bit like the last piece of the jigsaw for me in terms of how to live out my Dharma life, how to live out my desire to go for refuge to the Three Jewels. And soon after I started working as a chaplain, I went on my ordination retreat and joined the order. So it did really feel like that was the piece of the jigsaw. Yeah, so it took 7 years, but eventually I did find work that helped me to practice through my work. And that's very much how I see it. It's interesting, I was reflecting on how I had thought for a while it would be working at the centre, that's what I would do. I would work full-time for the movement, and that's the way it would happen. But actually, it ended up being very different to that. So it ended up with me moving away from, if you like, the Sangha and working within the Sangha to working in a very different context in the hospitals. So I wanted to say a little bit about how I see that work as practice, I guess, how I see working as a hospital chaplain as my Dharma practice, as my Dharma life. So there's lots of different ways that it does that. First of all, I'm there because I am a Buddhist and because I am ordained within this tradition, if you like. So I know sometimes it can sound a bit pedantic when people say, oh, are you a Buddhist chaplain? And I say, well, I'm a chaplain who happens to be a Buddhist. But actually that's quite an important difference, because I'm not there just for Buddhists. I'm there for everybody. And I happen to be at the moment the only non-Christian chaplain who has that role. So we're still a minority around the country. But it's really wonderful to be part of a team and to be someone who is able to just visit everybody in the hospital, regardless of what particular faith they have or no faith at all. But it does mean that I am pretty much on the spot all the time. There's no escape. You know, I am very visible. I use my order name. My name is now Satchiamega. So it's not a usual name. People automatically say, where's that from? Where are you from? Where have you got that funny name? How do you say that? What on earth, you know, all those sorts of things, which is lovely. So straight away, people know that I am a Buddhist. And for many people, I'm the only Buddhist they've ever met. And so that feels like a big responsibility. And I know that it's true for all of us in the context that we're in work, with families. That's often the case, but I'm just very aware of it in hospitals that, yes, when they meet me and they find out I'm a Buddhist, that I'm the only one they know. So I am the only Buddhist in the village. Thank you. Good. Glad some of you got that. Yeah. So there's a sense of wanting to be really true to my values, true to the way, to the Buddha's teaching in the way I am in the hospital, and to be authentic. And it has to be that, because you can't, if you're there all the time, you can't put on a face and put on a front. You have to be yourself. There's cheering, I'm wondering. Anyway, we'll see. Yeah. So there's that sense of always being, that there's no hiding place from being Satyamega, being a Buddhist, being ordained in my tradition. And that brings a sense of intensity for me to my practice. And then just my interactions with people offer me a way of practicing. Lots of different ways. I was reflecting. So when I'm with a patient, say, my sense of being, how I want to be with that person is all about awareness and mindfulness to begin with. My intention is to be fully present with that person for the time that we're together. And that is a practice. Any of you who's been on a ward in a hospital, they are noisy places. There's lots going on. There's all sorts of people comings and goings, and yet, is it possible to create that sense of sacred space? So Bodhin, I'm really interested in what you're going to say on Friday about sacred space. Can I create between us just that sense of being present for that person, really, really listening, deep listening? This is quite funny. This is practice. You see, again, I need to stay here and focused. My mind's going on. Yeah, and that's what it's like. That's what it's like, trying to really be present. So my practice of mindfulness, of wise attention, just really wanting to be with that person. And when I try to do that, I then just try to open my heart to this person. So practicing, if you like, the Brahma Viharas. Some of you may not have heard of those. They're the divine abodes. So it all starts with metta. So loving kindness, wanting the best for that person, wishing that person well. So that's really where it starts, is just trying to open my heart. And then when we know that when metta meets suffering, then compassion just naturally arises. Karuna just emerges. So if someone's speaking, or they're in pain, or their situation, if I try to just open my heart, and then that compassion is there for them. And then sometimes it's about mudita. Sometimes it's about rejoicing with that person because they've had good news, because they're able to go home, because the scan has come back and it's okay. So there's lots of times when you can really rejoice with someone and have that sense of sympathetic joy, of being able to, really rejoice with them. And then all around that and throughout my day is a desire, which I don't always, don't do all of this all the time by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the intention. But it's that intention to have a sense of equanimity, of being with whatever is going on, and watching my mental states, because it can be a bit of a roller coaster for me during the day. Just each encounter is so different, things happening, it can be a bit, but just trying to have a sense of groundedness and of working with a desire for equanimity. Not always there, but that's the desire. So hopefully from those you can see, there's just so many opportunities to practice in what I do in my work as a chaplain. So I really do see it as how I live out my going for refuge to the three joys. Of course, the interesting thing is that it is quite isolating in one sense, in that I'm doing this on my own. I have lovely colleagues, but they come from different traditions to me, and their approach obviously is different. So it's really important that I'm still tuned in and plugged into the Sangha, to being with all of you. And that's for me the sort of the bit that is the tension. And sometimes it's a creative tension, sometimes it feels less creative, it's hard to get that balance, because my heart really wants to be here. My heart really wants to be with the Sangha and to spend time with the Sangha. I love to teach, I love to be involved, I love to know what's going on, hate it when I don't know what's going on. But I don't have the time or the energy often to do as much as I want. And that's really challenging for me. Yeah, just that constant, working with that, wanting to be part of this. Well, I am part of the Sangha, but wanting to be more active in the Sangha, and yet not being able to always do that. So working with that is really important. And also just making sure that I have the conditions in place to help me to be able to do my work to the best of my ability, and to have the energy I need. So trying to set the conditions for that. And again, sometimes the balance is off, sometimes it feels like it's going okay. So for me, that's the importance of my home. That's the importance of my relationship with Vanessa, and being able to share my life with her and my practice with her, and our mutual going for Refuge. It's been part of a chapter, meeting regularly with my Dharma sisters. It's about being able to contribute to the Sangha, lovely with the Mitra study group that I gained so much from being with you, and going on retreat. And that's where I've really found this year hard. Not being able to physically go on retreat has been a big thing for me, because I find that helps me so much to rejuvenate my practice, just really always just increases my Shraddha, increases my sense of confidence in the life that I've chosen to lead. So that might be meditation retreats, study retreats, solitary retreats. So all those things sort of play a part in helping me to lead, to practice in this way. Yeah. So in a sense, that's sort of what I wanted to say, just to give you a little bit of an insight. There's so much one could say, but I'm aware that I have the ideal, I have my aspiration of how I want to be in the hospitals, of how I want to be as a chaplain. And then there's the reality. The two don't necessarily equate all the time. But I think for me, it's always about intention, as we know in our practice. It's about what is our intention, and then seeing how things go. And sometimes I'm skillful, and sometimes I'm not skillful, whatever. So I have an overwhelming sense of gratitude that I can do the work that I do. It's taken me to the age of, I think I was maybe, 48, to find work that actually I find really meaningful, challenging, difficult, hard, inspiring, so many different things. But it is a real gift, and I have just a huge amount of gratitude. Firstly, that I walked through the doors of the Buddhist Centre and had the welcome that I had, and could understand and learn the Buddha's teachings in a way that was accessible. So my gratitude to Sangha for that, and for all the order members and the Sangha who nurtured me and who welcomed me. And also to all those who support me now in the hospitals, and particularly back to Chris and Paul and Andrew, who really believed in me and still do, and who bucked the trend a bit and said, no, we can have a Buddhist on the team. That's good, we can do it. Why not? So I'm very grateful to them too. So there you go, that's a little bit about how I see my going for Refuge and how I practice at the moment. It may change in the future, but that's what I do for now. So I'll leave it there, thank you.
Well, thanks, Jamaica. And yeah, I was just really struck by that image of wanting to be present, in a very noisy hospital environment, and that tension between our ideals and where we want to be. I was also struck actually by your absolute bravery and intent to want to follow the spiritual life and giving up things in order to make that happen. And a quote came to mind: "When you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen." So thanks for that. And great. Okay, so now we've got Kshantika. So yes, what do I really love about Kshantika? Well, I find Kshantika, I always like to banter with you, Kshantika. I get filled with so much joy when we banter. And I always have this sense that you're available and you're there. And I think it's a rare gift just to be able to meet somebody. And I always feel really met by you. And I think there's something really genuine and authentic about you that I think I just naturally gravitate towards that in you. But I do love bantering with you. It's just something I've really enjoyed, often in the queue, in those old days when we used to queue up for tea and coffee, all those centuries ago. So yeah, so wonderful to have you do a talk for us tonight. And yeah, great. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you, Bodhi. May we have the opportunity to banter once again. Standing in the tea queue. Yeah, it'll have a whole different feel to it, won't it? When we can once again. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, good. So, yeah, when I heard, this was going to be the theme for a series of talks by order members, before I was asked, I was like, how do you talk about going for refuge? It's like not something I really think about how to articulate or talk about. Well, probably not since my ordination in 2006, and prior to that having to kind of talk about it quite a lot, but yeah, since then. So yeah, it's interesting. It's been interesting letting it kind of ponder. So, and also something I want to acknowledge is that probably every time I talk about any area of my life or practice, to acknowledge that actually it's through the filter of how I am now. It would be different every time. So what gets put in, what gets left out, yeah, that would change. This I'm letting my mind wander around the subject of going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. So it's something I quite like to do, particularly if I've got something coming up that I'm speaking about. Just drop it in now and again when I'm doing whatever and, see what bubbles up. And it's been different seeing different aspects of my life manifesting in my awareness, things I haven't thought about for some time. Some very familiar, with my history in Triratna, FWBO. I have done my life story in various ways at various times. It's a lovely way to get to know each other, sharing life stories. So some aspects can become a bit kind of, everybody knows that, I've said that kind of, but actually sometimes things have different connections. So it felt like actually in this reflection, a different connection, one different connection particular came up for me. So I am going to do a little bit more kind of background because I want to give a background really in a way to the focus on my practice being quite body based. So I am going to talk about some early stuff. So, but I'll start with where the thread of inspiration started. So, something that's been with me since I met the Buddha. So I first met the Buddha, I had the feeling of meeting the Buddha through the medium of Sangharachita's book, Who is the Buddha? Which is one of two books that I first read to find out about Buddhism. So it was introducing Buddhism and who is the Buddha. So that was before I had any contact or thought of meditation or, any contact with FWBO or Triratna. And two things that struck me from reading of the Buddha and the story of the Buddha's enlightenment was the clarity of his quest, that he was looking for the answer to human suffering. So, that really struck me. And that along the way, along his journey, he practiced with different teachers and different practices, and that he knew with each of those that they were not the way to the liberation he was seeking. So it is something I ponder now and again, that's kind of repeatedly come up over the years of how did he know? How did he know they were not the way? When to persist with something and go deeper, and when to move on. So that's kind of been an area of pondering for me. And this kind of approach resonated in my thought stream now with an aspect of me that as a child I used to kind of look at people, an observer, I'd be an observer, and I used to wonder how people knew how to do stuff in life. I kind of had this feeling that other people had a manual of how to do life and I didn't. So I used to kind of try and watch and learn and, not really understand. And in the last few years of, ranging a bit more broadly in my kind of reading and looking at stuff, I have come to understand some of my early years and childhood struggles and adult struggles. My sense as a kid of being wrong. And that my early years experiences actually did have a significant impact on my emotional development. So reading around the area of developmental trauma just made so much clear of my difficulties in growing up, and resonated and just put things in place of what had been going on. So I found, being a child, I found it difficult. My emotions overpowered me. I didn't have any way of dealing with them. Felt out of control. I didn't have any way to understand and nobody to talk to. And I now understand some of my experiences and responses of quite strong fight, flight, freeze. Sometimes I just completely could not speak, shut down. And I was aware as a kid in school that many adults found me difficult. I was seen in a particular way in my family. I was the difficult one. I was argumentative. I was stubborn. And even now that kind of resonates in how my family relate to me at times. And what I wanted as a kid was to feel safe, be loved. And have some clear boundaries from the adults around me. But, from their conditioning, whatever was going on, they weren't able to do that. They weren't able to create that. So, that all had its impact on my perceptions of the world, being threatening, and kind of areas that I just found so unable to cope with. Things like humour around being teased or laughed at, or if I was being told off about something. I just found those unbearable and not being able to cope with them. So I had a strong desire, even from quite early on. My recollection is that I wanted to change, but I didn't have any idea of how to work with myself. So I used to daydream about being someone else. I'd escape through television, books, daydreaming, sleeping as well. Sometimes I'd just kind of zonk out and just, block out, cut out. But through that and through my TV watching and film watching as well, I did connect with a sense an attraction to the idea of a quest. So I was quite drawn to martial arts films, and even I must have only been in my early teens. Somehow I went to several all-night kung fu films. I don't know how I managed it at quite a young age, but I did manage to stop out sometimes a bit early on in my teens. Yeah, and so I did actually start doing karate at some point, but fairly soon found it was a bit disappointing. It wasn't really, it didn't really give me what I was yearning for in that kind of imaginative, archetypal sense of the quest of the martial arts. And then in my teens came along alcohol, smoking, nicotine. I found both of those quite kind of helpful in a way for feeling a bit more kind of at ease with myself. You know, some recreational drugs, some I kind of dispensed with as really not appropriate for me. They helped me experience a sense of ease with other people. It took away some of the barriers for me. I had a sense of relief, of feeling less constrained. But, I did know it wasn't the real change that I sought. It was a seductive one, it was easy, and I kind of, and hard one to let go of in some ways. Also, in my feeling that sense of lack in myself, wanting to love and feel lovable, I looked to sexual partners in my teens. But even by the age of 18, around there, 18, 19, I had a sense that I was looking for those relationships to provide more than they could, to solve my difficulties. And that in some ways I had a sense that I was using people to kind of fulfill something in me. Another thread that I had of trying to fill the lack within me was seeking a sense of belonging. So I wanted to find my people. I wanted to connect with people with shared values. From quite early on, so early to mid-teens, I had this really strong sense that living off animals was a bizarre thing to do. So a desire to be vegetarian or vegan. I didn't feel a draw to kind of mainstream society and money and consumerism and those aspects of life. I had a strong sense of wanting to find an alternative life. And I came across animal rights groups and the Animal Liberation Front at the time. I was really struck by their bravery in actions for what they, perceived as being, trying to stop something that was dreadful, but something within me couldn't quite deal with aspects of violence or felt kind of threatened by it. But at the time, I couldn't really articulate that. I just felt like I was a bit of a wimp, for not getting more involved and not being so kind of brave as I saw it. So anyway, this strand of wanting to find community, of wanting to find my people, ended up with me moving from Nottingham to East London. And I ended up living in an anarcho-punk short-life housing co-op. And I did feel like I had community there. Some of those people I'm still in touch with. I felt a sense of belonging. I lived there for some years till my late 20s. Much of the time I did feel a sense of shared values, of friendship, of community. But over time, I had this sense that the values didn't really go deep enough, that there wasn't enough commonality, a sense of looking back that there was something I couldn't quite rely on. Now, during the time of living there, I also started Aikido. So I somehow heard of this as a martial art, and you know, picking up that thread, that mythic thread of the martial arts. But Aikido, from hearing of it, it felt much more in line with my values, the ethos of harmony and non-violence of Aikido. So yeah, that was a thread I kind of picked up from there that carried on for some time. So in seeing that, yeah, life in anarcho-punk community wasn't enough, I set off on another quest, another manifestation of my quest. It's all the same thread in some way. So I went back into education to see if I could actually take on the world of work and kind of life, and yeah, getting some kind of So I ended up moving to Newcastle and working in a museum and an art gallery. I let go of how I looked, my identity, and made some friends who weren't punks, and yeah, found a flat share in a kind of place that was much more habitable than I was used to living in. So it felt like I had achieved quite a lot, more than I thought I would be able to, of managing to work, to find a job, a decent place to live, a social life. I had Aikido on my doorstep, you know, which was very fortunate. It was just across the road. But it was not enough. Yeah. I could acknowledge, you know, how far I'd come in dealing with myself. But yeah, I'm just realising I missed a bit out. Anyway, yeah, because earlier on I'd had a bit that I missed out about, you know, when I first left home, I had a total terror of going to shops and using telephones. So yeah, I did at times give myself challenges in those ways. So yeah, anyway, I'll leave that bit. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I was living in Newcastle, fairly nice life, pleasant. But I had a sense of needing or wanting to change myself. Now, it didn't manifest as wanting to be someone else, but it manifested in a sense of wanting more control, wanted to control aspects of myself. So I set myself little tasks, goals, disciplines. So living in Newcastle, which is quite a lively city in terms of nightlife culture, I decided to set myself the task of giving up drinking and smoking and becoming more strictly vegan, because I think it had slid at the time. So that led to a conversation that actually then led me to spark an interest in Buddhism. So it was at that point I read these two books. I just went in a bookshop, it was Waterstones, and happened to choose Introducing Buddhism and Who is the Buddha. So I sat in that art gallery and I read those. And yeah, I was blown away really. I felt a really strong resonance with the story of the Buddha and his quest and enlightenment. The desire for that freedom of his enlightenment also resonated with the sense of it being for all. So even me, that if the Buddha had been here and now, that even I could have approached to ask my question, if only I knew what my question was. And also another thing was the centrality of ethics. That stood out for me. It's like, that resonated strongly. So, inspired by the Dharma, inspired by the Buddha, my next challenge I gave to myself was to do something I thought was completely impossible for me to do. I signed up to do a year of care work. So I volunteered as part of a scheme in Croydon, where you got a place to live and some pocket money, and you were part of a team being a personal support, personal assistant for a person with a disability. So you worked with the same person the whole time. Another draw to that was I knew there was a larger Buddhist centre. So I'd made contact with Tri Ratna, FWBO then. It was pure coincidence that the books I'd read were Sangha, and who I got in touch with to then follow that up. And there it was quite a small, it was a group, and then they got a centre, so it was quite small. There was 4 men order members and there was no women. So quite soon I had the sense of, might be good to go somewhere bigger. So the 2 strands of the challenge of putting myself in a situation, I hadn't thought I would have been able to, and going to a bigger centre. So over my time I was doing the care work. It was often evenings and weekends, so I had daytime. I got involved in the centre there, started volunteering, helping out around the centre, just getting to know people. And at that time in the Croydon Centre there was 2 businesses. There was a whole food shop and there was a vegetarian cafe or restaurant. And at the time I finished my care work stint, there was space in the whole food shop for me to join. So that's what I did. I joined the whole food shop in the Buddhist Centre, which was great for me because I had, a long-standing interest in food, in vegetarianism, veganism, and also herbal products. So I loved learning all about herbal tinctures and things like that. But I knew joining the team it would be a big challenge for me. But it felt like such an opportunity to work with fellow Buddhists. And also in the time I was in the shop we started a community. So it was challenging. Facing the effect I had on others, how others perceived and experienced me, as well as seeing more clearly my responses to others and how my conditioning played itself out in communication and particularly in working with other people. I think working is such a strong area because you can't hide from each other. Even living together, you can sometimes close the door and avoid difficult areas, but I think something about work. And so while I was in the shop, I had carried on doing Aikido. I was doing quite an active form of Aikido in Croydon, and I suffered an injury. I was also doing a little bit of yoga, but so through my injury, I just twisted my ankle. I started doing yoga much more regularly, more intensely. And in that time, there was quite a significant shift. It was like I found a piece that was missing for me in my practice. So I had a level of bodywork and practice from the Aikido and some yoga. But now I really started to feel the effect of the bodywork on my emotional being. It was like layers of my armouring started to soften in a way that I hadn't got to in meditation. And other people started to notice the change in me. It felt like through the practice, and it was particularly the practices of using supports, which is now probably more akin to restorative. It felt like it gave me a practice where I could work quite directly on my emotions, come into being able to feel them without being overwhelmed, without needing to get rid of parts of myself. Yeah, you know, it's not that it fixed everything, but what it resonated for me is, not that I'm a Buddha, but like when the Buddha was sitting under the rose apple tree, when he'd been practicing the ascetic practices and was emaciated, and he had the recollection of the rose apple tree and that sense of, yeah, that big shift that brought about. So for those that are less, don't know that story, it was, he saw from a place of austerity and hardship imposed on his body, starvation, he saw that there could be pleasure that wasn't rooted in desire. But anyway, it's more that, he made that shift. So for me, it felt like that shift in my practice, and that from there has continued to unfold and deepen. So from there, in the early 2000s, I trained and qualified as an Iyengar yoga teacher. And this it just happened to be the teaching that was available to me at the centre at the time. And my teacher trainer, actually, Pam, she was a very dedicated teacher. She gave us so much. She had a very eclectic bunch of students and purposely did her training through adult education, so it was accessible to people who it wouldn't necessarily have been accessible to. She was a very lovely, dedicated person. So I have much appreciation for her. And also, I think Iyengar yoga at the time was popular in Triratna centres because it didn't emphasise the philosophical side of yoga so much in the training. And for me, that suited me because I was much more into deepening my understanding of the teachings of the Buddha. You know, I didn't want to be pulled in different directions with my philosophical understanding. I was very clear on that. But I was also very, connected with it as a practice, as part of my spiritual life. So when I left Croydon and returned to my hometown of Nottingham, it was quite a shift. I went from working in a team of Buddhists to working in social services finance, working in the world, so not being with other Buddhists. And I didn't have a role in the centre here. It took quite a while to get involved in the Sangha in Nottingham. And that kind of gave me the push to become a little bit more independent in my practice. And an effect that rippled out from that sense of more independence, I came to see that some of my responses, my difficulties, around difficulty and other people of being armoured and feeling the need to defend myself, meant that I couldn't really be ethically sensitive, and how much I needed time alone to tune into myself, the sense of my actions, and how to deepen my ethical sensitivity. So back in Nottingham, I carried on teaching for a little while and practicing in the Iyengar tradition. And I did enjoy the Iyengar community in Nottingham, but I was feeling less comfortable with some aspects of that style of yoga teaching. It felt like a push to create, to push the body in certain ways that I didn't feel helpful. I yearned for something a bit more sensitive and intuitive. So when I went on my ordination retreat, which was 2006, I let go of my teaching and being an Iyengar teacher. And when I came back, I started going to a class that was put on through work. And it was just so soft in comparison and easy. It didn't feel like it was my forever yoga home, but it felt like an important time to just be at the back of the class and just let go of some of my yoga conditioning. It felt like a good time to just allow something to percolate through. And then after some years, something shifted. A voice came in that maybe I could teach. It had been a big thing for me qualifying to teach yoga, because it was such a significant practice for me, that to share that to other people that might, have that impact, that need for the practice. That I still had that there. But I'd had a sense of, I had to put it down, and I couldn't see how to pick it up. But then I became more aware of Sudhaka and Sadhita. So I knew Sudhaka from some years previously. But that they were doing teacher training and teaching, bringing the Satipatthana, or the Buddhist teaching on mindfulness, very much into connection with the yoga practice. So they were making that fusion of Buddhist practice and yoga. So that seemed like a great way to do a bit more work on integrating these two practices that have been so important to me, which I hadn't fully integrated in a way. So I'd been doing, Buddhist studies for years and deepening my practice in a Buddhist context. And I felt more independent in my Dharma practice, but my yoga practice still had a way to go. But it's been through engaging with them and their training, and finding a teacher whose work I was interested in. It's like I started to feel free. It freed something up in me to follow a thread that really kind of felt meaningful for me, and bringing together my Dharmic understanding and Dharmic practice with the yoga, and also getting more kind of understanding from like neuroscience and trauma stuff. This felt like an integrating process that's still going on in a way. So, in rounding up, becoming part of the Sangha, Triratna, FWBO, becoming a Buddhist, and then joining the order, it's certainly not always been easy. In fact, there have been quite a lot of times when it's not. For me, familiar feelings of not fitting in, of being found difficult, have come up. But there has been something that has kept me, a sense of a deeper thread and a more meaningful quest that has kept me here. Even when the going's been difficult, it's been, bumpy at times, and a difficult fit. So coming back to that first connection with the Buddha, my curiosity about how the Buddha knew the approaches he tried were not the way to freedom. In looking back at my life, I now connected this with the times when I have known at some level that there was more, that this was it, that this was not it, that I needed to look elsewhere until I found the strand, the thread I wanted to stay with, the thread that had the taste of freedom. So I resonate with this quote from Rilke. It was in a letter to a young student. So I'm definitely not a young student, but it still resonates with being with the question and the quest unfolding from there. So I'll just read this. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart. So be patient be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. So be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer.
Thanks, Kshantika. That was very engaging, and yeah, fascinating hearing about your search around the body, and which I'm sort of really connected with, particularly being engaged with theatre. And I was sort of thinking about Bante's quite famous aphorism, you know, where we're looking for emotional equivalents to our intellectual understanding, and I was thinking about bodily equivalents to our intellectual understanding, which sort of captured my imagination. But yeah, a real sense of experimenting and searching, and I think that sometimes it's easy to forget this whole thing is an experiment. You know, Taratna is an experiment, and I think there's something about that kind of attitude, particularly in your talk, that sort of kept your heart open, you know, and looking for new possibilities, and that deepening of understanding, and almost coming back to that you know, your body and the importance to that. Yeah, thanks for that. Really wonderful, both of you. Sort of really different talks, which is great, you know, different personalities and different expressions of going for refuge. And yeah, it's just so great where we're all so different, you know. There's no sort of a stock standard order member, thank goodness. So it's 25 past. Well, there's not much more we can do really at this late stage, is there? Unless anyone's got a quick question to either of our